I agreed to split my inheritance equally with my siblings until the lawyer handed me the letter our father wrote explaining why they shouldn't get a cent. Dad's funeral was 2 days ago. Standard affair, crying relatives, uncomfortable folding chairs, casseroles from neighbors who barely knew him. My older brother gave a touching eulogy about what a great man Dad was. My younger sister sobbed into tissues she'd probably bought for the performance. I sat in the back row and said nothing. The will reading was scheduled for today at 2 p.m. I showed up early because I'm always early. My siblings arrived together, laughing about something, probably already planning how to spend their share. Dad's estate was worth $847,000. Split 3 ways, that's roughly $282,000 each. Enough to change your life if you're smart about it. Mr. Patterson, Dad's lawyer for 30 years, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Before we begin with the formal will, your father left specific instructions. He slid a sealed envelope across the mahogany table. My name was written on it in Dad's shaky handwriting. He requested you read this first, alone. My brother immediately objected. That's not fair. We should all hear it together. Your father was very clear, Mr. Patterson said firmly. I took the envelope to the small conference room down the hall. My hands shook as I tore it open. Dad's letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, dated 2 weeks before he died. The first page detailed something that happened when I was 16. Mom had just died from cancer. I was drowning in grief, failing classes, barely eating. My siblings were in their 20s, both living out of state with their own lives. They visited once for the funeral, stayed 3 days, then left. I was alone in that house with Dad, who was so broken he could barely function. I learned to cook. I paid bills with Dad's checkbook when he forgot. I drove him to therapy appointments he didn't want to attend. I held him when he cried at 3 a.m., missing Mom. I was a child raising my parent, and my siblings never called to check on either of us. The second page was worse. Dad had been secretly paying my brother's gambling debts for 5 years, $43,000 total. Money that should have been saved for his medical care, for his future, for my college fund. My brother had promised to pay him back. He never did. Not a single dollar. My sister wasn't any better. Dad loaned her $28,000 for her business venture that everyone except Dad knew was a scam. When it predictably failed, she blamed him for not giving her more money to make it work. She hadn't spoken to him in 2 years. Didn't even call on his birthday. The third page made my stomach drop. 6 months ago, both siblings had visited Dad separately. Both had asked him to sign over his house to them early before he died, to avoid estate taxes. They wanted to sell it immediately and split the profit. Never mind that Dad was still living there, still needed a home. Dad's final paragraph was simple. You were there when it mattered. You're the only one who loved me without wanting something in return. The house, the savings, the investments. It's all yours. Let them contest it if they want. Mr. Patterson has documentation of everything. I sat in that conference room for 20 minutes, reading and rereading those pages. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother. What's taking so long? We're all waiting. I walked back into the main office. My siblings looked annoyed. Mr. Patterson looked sympathetic. He'd clearly known what was in the letter. Well? My sister asked impatiently. What did it say? I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. It said Dad changed his will. Changed it how? Mr. Patterson pulled out the official document. Your father left his entire estate to... The conference room door suddenly burst open. A woman I'd never seen before stood there, holding a folder thick with papers. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but I'm Victoria Reeves and I'm here regarding Robert's other children. The room went silent. His what? I heard myself say. She smiled apologetically. I represent your half-siblings. There are 4 of them. They're contesting this will, and they have documentation proving they're entitled to... Get out, Mr. Patterson said. His voice was ice. This is a private meeting. You have no right to barge in here. Victoria didn't move. I have every right. My clients are legal heirs to Robert Henderson's estate, and they were deliberately excluded from... Your clients, Mr. Patterson interrupted, were the product of affairs that ended before any of these 3 were born. Robert had no legal obligation to them whatsoever. My brain was still catching up. Dad had other children, 4 of them, from affairs. My brother found his voice first. How much do they want? Victoria's smile widened. 20% each. That's fair, considering 80% of our father's estate, my sister said slowly. You want us to give strangers 80%. They're not strangers. They're family. They're nothing, my brother snapped. Dad didn't even know them. That's when I noticed Mr. Patterson's expression. He looked tired, like he'd been expecting this. How long have you known? I asked him. He sighed and removed his glasses. Your father told me about them 5 years ago, when he was updating his will after his cancer diagnosis. He wanted to be transparent about why he wasn't leaving them anything. And why wasn't he? Victoria challenged. Because he abandoned their mothers? Because he refused to acknowledge his own children? Mr. Patterson pulled out another file. This one was even thicker. Because 3 of them contacted him only after his cancer became public knowledge. The 4th one never contacted him at all. Your clients, Ms. Reeves, want money from a man who raised 3 children, buried a wife, and worked 60-hour weeks at the plant for 40 years. A man they collectively spent maybe 15 hours with in their entire lives. Victoria's jaw tightened. The law doesn't care about emotional connections. It cares about biological facts and fair distribution of assets. Then let's talk about biological facts, Mr. Patterson said. He opened the file and pulled out several documents. Your first client, Trevor Haynes, claims Robert is his father. The affair allegedly happened in 1979. Robert has documentation proving he was deployed overseas with the National Guard during the entire window of conception. Would you like to see the military records? Victoria's smile faltered slightly. Your second client, Whitney Torres, claims her mother had a relationship with Robert in 1982. Robert's phone records from that year show 47 calls to marriage counselors and family therapists. He and his wife were actively working on their marriage after a rough patch. The timeline doesn't match Whitney's mother's story, and genetic testing that Whitney herself requested came back negative. That test is in this file. My brother leaned forward. So, they're not even related to Dad? Two of them aren't, Mr. Patterson confirmed. The other two are, Natalie Henderson and Christopher Blake. Both are Robert's biological children from brief relationships during a 6-month separation from his wife in 1977. Robert paid child support for both of them until they turned 18. He fulfilled every legal obligation. The mothers chose not to maintain contact beyond the financial support. I found my voice. Did Dad ever try to see them? Mr. Patterson nodded slowly. He tried. Natalie's mother moved to Oregon when Natalie was 3. She made it clear Robert wasn't welcome in their lives beyond the checks. Christopher's mother remarried when he was 5. Her new husband adopted Christopher, and Robert respected their wish to be left alone. He kept paying support anyway, even though the adoption legally ended his obligation. This is irrelevant, Victoria said. My clients are pursuing this action because Natalie is $80,000 in debt from a failed restaurant, Mr. Patterson interrupted, and Christopher got fired from his job for embezzlement last month. His trial starts in January. These aren't people seeking connection with their father's legacy. These are people seeking a bailout. The room temperature seemed to drop. My sister spoke up. So, what happens now? Now, Mr. Patterson said, we go to court if Ms. Reeves insists. We present all this documentation. We show that Robert's will was made with full knowledge of all his biological children and that he had sound reasons for his decisions. We demonstrate that he met every legal obligation to Natalie and Christopher and that Trevor and Whitney have no legitimate claim whatsoever. We waste 6 months and $30,000 in legal fees fighting a case we'll win. Victoria's folder was still in her hands, but she wasn't smiling anymore. My clients deserve, your clients, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice, deserve exactly what Dad gave them. Nothing more, nothing less. He paid child support for 18 years to 2 of them. He had no obligation to the other 2 because they aren't his children. And now that he's dead, they show up wanting more. Your father abandoned them, Victoria tried again. He chose his legitimate family over... He chose the family he raised, I said. The family he was with every single day. The wife he loved. The children he put through school. The house he worked to pay off. That's not abandonment. That's called being present. My brother and sister were staring at me. I'd barely spoken 10 words at the funeral, and now I couldn't stop. I was 16 when Mom died, I continued. Dad fell apart. He couldn't function. I learned to cook, to pay bills, to drive him to therapy. I held him when he cried. I gave up being a kid because my family needed me. And these people, wherever they are, they think they deserve a cut of what Dad built? They think they're entitled to money from a man they never knew? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. Mr. Patterson pulled out yet another document. Ms. Reeves, I assume you've done your research. You know that Robert Henderson's will has an in terrorem clause. Anyone who contests it and loses will forfeit any right to inheritance, including through other legal channels. Are you prepared to advise your clients to take that risk? The silence stretched out. Finally, Victoria gathered her papers. I'll need to consult with my clients. You do that, Mr. Patterson said. My office hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Don't burst into my meetings again. She left without another word. The door clicked shut. My brother exhaled loudly. What the hell just happened? Mr. Patterson sat down heavily. What happened is that Ms. Reeves thought she could intimidate you into a quick settlement. She represents people who saw an obituary and smelled money. This happens more often than you'd think. But 2 of them are actually Dad's kids, my sister said. Doesn't that mean something? Legally? Not really. Robert paid child support. He tried to maintain contact. The mothers chose otherwise. When those children turned 18, they had the option to reach out to their father. Neither did until 6 months ago, when Robert's cancer became public knowledge. I thought about that. Dad had been sick for 8 months before he died. Natalie and Christopher had reached out 6 months ago, right around the time the local paper did that article about Dad's 40 years at the plant, mentioning his illness and his 3 children. They weren't calling to say goodbye, I said quietly. They were calling to make sure they'd be in the will. Mr. Patterson didn't disagree. My brother rubbed his face. So, do we fight this or do we settle? That depends, Mr. Patterson said, looking at me. The will leaves everything to you. Your siblings only inherit if you choose to share it with them. And now you have 4 additional people claiming they deserve a portion. What do you want to do? I pulled out Dad's letter. Read it again. Thought about 16-year-old me learning to cook casseroles and balance a checkbook. Thought about Dad crying in the dark at 3 a.m. Thought about my siblings who'd asked him to sign over his house while he was still living in it. I want to honor Dad's wishes, I said. We fight this. All of it. My sister's face went pale. What does that mean? It means Dad left everything to me for a reason. He documented every loan, every broken promise, every time you weren't there. Mr. Patterson has all of it. And if these half-siblings want to drag us to court, we'll show the judge exactly why Dad made the choices he made. You're cutting us out? My brother said. He looked genuinely shocked. You cut yourselves out, I said. You asked a dying man to give you his house. You took $71,000 from him and never paid back a cent. You stopped calling, stopped visiting. You loved him when it was convenient and forgot him when it wasn't. My sister stood up. This is insane. We're your family. So was Dad. And you treated him like an ATM. They both stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Maybe I had. The me from a week ago would have quietly agreed to split everything, would have avoided conflict, would have made peace at any cost. But that was before I read Dad's letter, before I understood that sometimes keeping the peace means accepting injustice. Mr. Patterson, I said, proceed with the will as written. If Ms. Reeves files a contest, fight it. If my siblings want to challenge it, fight that too. My brother's shock turned to anger. You selfish! I was there, I interrupted. When it mattered, I was there. That's the only thing that matters now. They left. They didn't storm out dramatically. They just gathered their things quietly and walked away. My sister's hand shook as she picked up her purse. My brother's face was red, but he didn't say anything else. When the door closed, Mr. Patterson poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. That took courage. That took reading a letter, I corrected. Dad gave me the courage. I'm just following through. He nodded slowly. I need to tell you something else. Something your father asked me to share only if you decided to honor his will exactly as written. My stomach tightened. What now? He pulled out one more envelope. This one had my name written in Dad's handwriting, but underneath it said, open only if she refuses to share. I tore it open. Inside was a single page. I knew you'd do the right thing, it started. I knew because you've always done the right thing, even when it cost you. When your siblings demanded you split everything, you probably considered it. That's who you are. But I need you to understand something. The money isn't a reward, it's a responsibility. The letter went on to explain that Dad had made arrangements. The house wasn't just a house. It was fully paid off, worth $340,000 in the current market. The savings wasn't just savings. It included investments he'd been building since I was born. The life insurance wasn't just a payout. It was structured to provide income. You gave up college to take care of me, Dad wrote. You put your life on hold. This money is meant to give you back what you lost. Go to school if you want. Travel if you want. Start a business. Buy a house. Live the life you should have had at 23 instead of 29. But please, don't give it away to people who didn't earn it. The last paragraph made my eyes burn. I'm sorry I never thanked you properly. I'm sorry I took 6 years to realize how much you sacrificed. I'm sorry your mother and I raised children who learned to take but never to give. You deserved better siblings, better parents, better everything. This is the only thing I can give you now, and I'm begging you not to throw it away on people who will waste it. You were the only one who loved me without wanting something in return. Let me love you back in the only way I have left. I sat there holding the letter while Mr. Patterson pretended to organize his files. When I could speak again, I asked, did he know they'd contest it? The half-siblings? He suspected. Natalie called him 4 times in the last 3 months. Christopher visited once. Both conversations involved money. Both times Robert said no. He told me he expected them to hire a lawyer after he died. And my siblings? He hoped they'd surprise him, but he wasn't counting on it. I looked at the letter again. At Dad's shaky handwriting. He'd written this 2 weeks before he died, when every movement caused pain. He'd used those precious last days to protect me. What happens next? I asked. Mr. Patterson pulled out a timeline. Ms. Reeves has 30 days to file a formal contest. If she does, we respond with all the documentation I showed you today. If your siblings decide to contest separately, we handle that too. The estate stays in probate until everything's resolved, but I can release some funds for immediate expenses. The house is yours now. The savings account is frozen until the contest period expires. How long will this take? If they contest and push it to trial, 6 to 8 months. If they see our evidence and back down, maybe 6 weeks. Most of these cases settle once the reality sets in. People get brave when they think inheritance is easy money. They get scared when they see legal fees piling up. Over the next week, I moved into Dad's house, our house now. It felt strange sleeping in my childhood bedroom, while Dad's room sat empty down the hall. I couldn't bring myself to touch his things yet. His reading glasses were still on the nightstand, his slippers under the bed. My siblings tried calling. I didn't answer. They tried texting. I blocked them. My brother showed up at the house on day 3, banging on the door. We need to talk, he shouted. I watched through the window until he left. On day 8, Ms. Reeves filed the formal contest. Trevor, Whitney, Natalie, and Christopher against the estate of Robert Henderson. They wanted the will overturned and everything split 5 ways, 20% each. Mr. Patterson filed our response the same day. The genetic tests showing Trevor and Whitney weren't related. The child support records for Natalie and Christopher. The documentation of Dad's attempts to maintain contact. The proof that all 4 had only reached out after his illness became public. On day 12, my sister called from a number I didn't have blocked. I answered by mistake. Please, she said. Her voice was small. We need to talk. There's nothing to say. There's everything to say. I know I messed up. I know I hurt Dad. But he was my father too. I loved him. Did you? I asked. Did you love him when you took his money and blamed him for your failure? Did you love him when you asked him to give you his house while he was dying? Silence. I was scared, she finally said. My business failed. I lost everything. I was desperate. So was I when I was 16 and had to hold Dad while he cried. So was Dad when Mom died and you left after 3 days. Being scared doesn't excuse what you did. I was young. I didn't know how to handle it. You were 24, I said. I was 16. More silence. What do you want me to say? She asked. Nothing. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You can't treat people like they're disposable and then expect forgiveness when it's convenient. She started crying. I hung up. On day 15, my brother's wife called. That was unexpected. I'd met her twice at holidays. She seemed nice in a distant way. I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone right now, she started, but I need you to know something. Your brother's gambling isn't under control. He's been betting on sports again. He took out a second mortgage on our house last month without telling me. I only found out when the bank called. I didn't say anything. He thinks your dad's money will fix everything, she continued, but it won't. He'll gamble it all away within a year. I can't stop him, but maybe you can. How? I asked. By not giving it to him. I know that sounds terrible. He's going to be furious with me for calling you. But if he gets $282,000, we'll lose our house. He'll bet it all, and I'll be left with nothing and 2 kids to feed. Your father knew. That's why he didn't leave him anything. She was right. Dad had known. That's what the second page of his letter was about. My brother hadn't just owed Dad $43,000. He had a problem, and Dad had been protecting him from himself by saying no. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. Just don't give him the money, please. She hung up before I could respond. On day 20, Mr. Patterson called. Ms. Reeves wants to meet. Her clients are willing to settle. For how much? $50,000 total, $12,500 each. She claims it's a good faith offer to avoid legal fees. I thought about it. $50,000 would barely dent the estate. It would end the fight. It would make this all go away. No, I said. Are you sure? Trials are expensive and emotionally draining. This would... No, I repeated. Dad said they don't deserve anything. He was right. Mr. Patterson was quiet for a moment. I'll inform Ms. Reeves. On day 23, Whitney dropped her claim. The genetic test results had been made public as part of our filing. She issued a statement saying there had been a misunderstanding, and she wasn't actually related to Robert Henderson. Trevor dropped his claim 2 days later for the same reason. That left Natalie and Christopher. On day 30, they both filed affidavits. Natalie's described how Dad had abandoned her and her mother, how she'd grown up without a father, how she deserved compensation for her emotional suffering. Christopher's was similar. They both positioned themselves as victims of Dad's choices. Mr. Patterson's response was brutal. He submitted Dad's letters to both mothers, requesting visitation. Their refusals. The child support checks, every single one, never late, never short. He submitted letters from neighbors in Oregon who remembered Dad driving 6 hours to see Natalie when she was 4, only to be turned away at the door. He submitted testimony from Christopher's adoptive father, who confirmed that Dad had respected their request for distance, but had still paid support, even after the adoption made it unnecessary. The narrative shifted. They weren't abandoned children. They were adults with complicated histories who'd chosen not to pursue relationships with their biological father until money was involved. On day 45, my brother filed his own contest. He claimed Dad had been mentally incompetent when he wrote the will, that Dad's cancer medication had affected his judgment, that Dad couldn't have meant to disinherit his own son. Mr. Patterson filed medical records. Dad had been on pain medication, but his doctor confirmed he'd been mentally sharp until his last 3 days. The will had been signed months before his mental decline. Multiple witnesses had confirmed Dad's competency. My sister never filed. She called once more, left a voicemail saying she was sorry and she understood. I didn't call back. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for day 60. I showed up in the same black dress I'd worn to Dad's funeral. My brother and his wife sat on one side of the courtroom. Natalie and Christopher sat on the other. They didn't look like villains. They looked like regular people who needed money. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Brennan. She reviewed the case files for 10 minutes, then looked up at us. This is a complicated situation, she started, but the law is relatively clear. Robert Henderson had the right to distribute his assets as he saw fit. The question before this court is whether he was competent when he made those decisions, and whether those decisions violated any legal obligations to his heirs. Ms. Reeves stood. Your Honor, my clients were denied their rightful inheritance, despite being biological children of the deceased. The will demonstrates clear bias against your clients, Judge Brennan interrupted, received 18 years of child support. Both chose not to pursue relationships with their father until he was terminally ill. That's not bias. That's consequences. Ms. Reeves sat down. The judge turned to my brother's lawyer. And you're claiming mental incompetence based on pain medication? Yes, Your Honor. The dosage of morphine my client's father was taking was within normal parameters for a cancer patient, according to the medical records. And the will was executed during a lucid period, with multiple witnesses confirming competency. Do you have any evidence to the contrary? My brother's lawyer shuffled papers. We believe further examination might reveal... You believe, or you can prove? We believe, Your Honor. Judge Brennan closed the file. Here's what I see. I see a man who worked for 40 years, raised 3 children, and paid child support to 2 others. I see a man who documented his reasons for his final wishes. I see adult children who had opportunities to build relationships and chose not to. I see siblings who borrowed money and didn't pay it back. And I see one daughter who gave up 6 years of her life to care for her dying father. She looked directly at me. You were 16 when your mother died? Yes, Your Honor. And you cared for your father through his grief? Yes. And later through his cancer? Yes. She nodded slowly. The law doesn't reward virtue, but it does protect a person's right to acknowledge virtue in their final wishes. Mr. Henderson's will is valid. His competency is established. His obligations to all parties were fulfilled during his lifetime. This case is dismissed. The gavel came down. Ms. Reeves stood immediately. Your Honor, we request... Denied. This case is dismissed. If you want to appeal, you know the process, but I'm telling you right now, you won't win. It was over. My brother left without looking at me. His wife stopped at the door, mouthed thank you, and followed him out. Natalie and Christopher conferred with Ms. Reeves, then left through a side exit. I sat in the courtroom until it emptied. Mr. Patterson appeared beside me. The estate will be released within 30 days, unless someone files an appeal, but I doubt they will. Judge Brennan's ruling was decisive. Is it really over? The legal part is. The emotional part might take longer. He was right. Over the next month, I kept expecting my phone to ring, kept expecting someone to show up at the house, but nobody did. The estate was released on day 93, $847,000 minus legal fees, minus estate taxes. I received $723,000 in cash and investments, plus the house. I sat in Dad's kitchen, my kitchen, looking at the bank statement. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More than enough to change my life completely. I thought about Dad's letter, about going back to school, about traveling, about living the life I should have had at 23 instead of 29. I enrolled in nursing school the following semester. I'd always wanted to be a nurse, but college had seemed impossible when I was 16 and drowning in responsibility. Now, it was possible. I kept the house, remodeled the kitchen, turned Dad's room into a study, kept his reading glasses on the shelf where he'd left them. My brother's wife filed for divorce 6 months later. She got primary custody of the kids in the house. My brother moved into an apartment and started attending Gamblers Anonymous. His wife sent me a Christmas card with a note. He's trying. Thank you for not enabling him. My sister got a job at a marketing firm. She sent a letter on the anniversary of Dad's death. I'm sorry was all it said. I wrote back. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. We started texting occasionally. Short messages, awkward but honest. Natalie sent a Facebook friend request. I declined it. Christopher didn't contact me at all. On the 1-year anniversary of Dad's death, I visited his grave, brought flowers, sat on the grass beside the headstone. I'm in nursing school, I told him. Top of my class. I'm using the money the way you wanted. I haven't wasted it, haven't given it away. I'm building something. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. I miss you, I said. I'm angry at you sometimes for leaving, for putting me in this position. But I understand why you did what you did. I understand what you were trying to tell me. A bird landed on his headstone, then flew away. You were right about them, I continued. You were right about everything. I just wish you'd been brave enough to tell them yourself while you were alive. I wish you'd been brave enough to say no when they asked for money. But I guess that's what I'm doing now, being brave for both of us. I stayed until the sun started setting. Then I drove home to the house that was finally, legally, completely mine. The house that represented 40 years of Dad's labor. The house that held every memory of Mom and childhood and grief and survival. I could have sold it, moved somewhere new, started fresh. But this house was my inheritance in ways that had nothing to do with money. It was proof that I'd been there when it mattered. Proof that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect words. It's about showing up, staying present, holding someone when they cry at 3 a.m. 2 years later, I graduated nursing school. My brother came to the ceremony. We didn't hug, but we talked for 10 minutes. He introduced me to his AA sponsor, said he'd been sober from gambling for 8 months. His ex-wife had let him see the kids more often. I was wrong, he said, about everything, about Dad, about the money, about thinking I was entitled to something I didn't earn. I know, I said. Are you ever going to forgive me? I don't know, I answered honestly, but I'm working on it. My sister came too. She'd gotten engaged to someone who worked at her firm, someone stable and kind who didn't ask her for loans. She'd paid off half her debts through budgeting and hard work. Dad would be proud of you, she said, hugging me after the ceremony. He'd be proud of you too, I replied. You're figuring it out. Years too late. Better late than never. We took a photo together, the three of us. First time in 2 years we'd been in the same place. I posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Family is complicated." Natalie commented on it, "Congratulations on your graduation." I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. 3 years after Dad's death, I got my first nursing job at the hospital where he'd spent his final weeks. I recognized some of the nurses who'd cared for him. They remembered me too. The daughter who'd slept in the chair beside his bed, who'd asked questions and taken notes, who'd held his hand when he was too weak to speak. He talked about you, one nurse told me during orientation. Said you gave up everything to take care of him. Said he wished he'd told you sooner how much it meant. He told me, I said, eventually. I worked in oncology, sat with patients who were terrified and in pain, held the hands of family members who didn't know what to say, watched adult children grapple with role reversal, suddenly becoming the caretakers for parents who'd once cared for them. Some of those children showed up every day the way I had. Some showed up once and never came back. Some didn't show up at all until the reading of the will. I understood all of them. The present ones, the absent ones, the ones who arrived too late. Everyone carries their own history of hurt and obligation and fear. Everyone has reasons for the choices they make, even when those choices hurt the people they love. But understanding doesn't mean excusing, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. 5 years after Dad's death, I got married. Small ceremony, just close friends. My brother walked me down the aisle because Dad couldn't. My sister read a poem. We held the reception in the backyard of Dad's house, my house, under string lights and a sky full of stars. During the toasts, my brother stood up with his glass of ginger ale. "To my little sister," he said, "who's always been the strongest person in this family, even when we didn't deserve her strength, who taught me that love is measured in actions, not words, who showed me what it means to be there when it matters." My sister raised her glass. "To the person who got the inheritance we all wanted, and who deserved every penny of it. May we all be lucky enough to become the people you already are." I cried. Not elegant tears, but ugly sobbing that probably ruined my makeup. Because after 5 years of fighting and distance and slowly rebuilt bridges, this was what Dad had wanted. Not perfect reconciliation, not pretending the past didn't happen, but acknowledgement, growth, learning from mistakes instead of repeating them. The money from Dad's estate was mostly gone by then. Nursing school, the wedding, A honeymoon in Europe, investments in a retirement fund. But the house remained, filled now with new memories alongside the old ones. My husband's books on Dad's old shelves. My nursing textbooks where Mom's cookbooks used to be. Different, but still home. Sometimes I think about how close I came to splitting everything 3 ways. How I almost took the easier path. How I almost chose temporary peace over long-term justice. But Dad's letter had asked me to be brave, to honor what he'd built, to value what I'd given. And I had been brave. For him, for me, for the person I was at 16, holding my father while he cried. For the person I'd become at 29, holding his will in my hands and choosing what was right over what was easy. The inheritance wasn't about money. It was never about money. It was about being seen, being valued, being told in the only way Dad had left that my presence had mattered, that my sacrifice had been noticed, that love, real love, was more than just showing up for the good parts. It was showing up for the hard parts too. The $847,000 was just a number. What mattered was what it represented. A father's gratitude. A lifetime of working and saving and trying to do right by the child who'd done right by him. A final message from beyond the grave that said, "You were enough. You are enough. Everything you gave was worth something." I keep Dad's letter in my nightstand. Read it sometimes when I need reminding that I made the right choice. That standing firm wasn't selfish. It was self-respect. That honoring his wishes wasn't about punishing my siblings. It was about validating 6 years of my life that no one else had witnessed or appreciated. On the 10-year anniversary of Mom's death, I visited both their graves, brought flowers for each, sat between their headstones and told them everything. About nursing school, about my marriage, about my brother's recovery and my sister's stability, about how their family, broken as it was, had found a way to heal. We're okay, I told them. Not perfect, but okay. And I think that's all you ever wanted for us. To be okay. To figure it out. To grow up and become people you'd be proud of. The wind carried my words away. I stood up, brushed grass off my jeans, and walked back to my car. Back to the life I'd built with Dad's gift. The education, the career, the home, the second chance at the youth I'd given up when I was 16. I'd made my choice in that lawyer's office 5 years ago. I'd chosen to honor Dad's wishes, even though it cost me my siblings' approval, even though it made me the villain in their stories, even though it was hard and lonely and required a kind of strength I didn't know I had. But it was the right choice. Not because I got the money. Not because I won the fight, but because I learned something Dad spent his whole life trying to teach me. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes caring for someone means refusing to enable them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. Dad had loved us all, but he'd loved us enough to be honest about who we'd become, to document our failures, to reward presence over promises, to give his estate to the child who'd earned it, not the children who felt entitled to it. And in doing so, he'd given me more than money. He'd given me permission to value myself, to believe that my presence had mattered, to understand that sacrifice deserved acknowledgement, not just expectation. The inheritance was never about the $847,000. It was about a father telling his daughter, "You were there when I needed you most. That's worth more than anything I own. Take it. Use it. Build the life you couldn't build when you were busy taking care of me. Live well, be happy, and never feel guilty for accepting what you earned." I drive home as the sun sets, grateful for every difficult choice I made, grateful for Dad's letter, grateful for the courage to stand firm, grateful for the inheritance, all of it, the money, the house, the lessons, the validation, grateful that I was there when it mattered, and that finally, I matter too.